15th of December 2022. In this what a fuck moment, I'm going to talk about the Americans and specifically about all their bases around the globe. I initially had a different idea of how to tackle this, but then last night I read some disturbing stuff and I decided to do this a little bit different. What we have to take into consideration is that the Americans are actually ruthless terrorists, global terrorists. Look at this image. This is an image of the capital of Libya before the Americans brought democracy to it. And here, that is what is left of a once thriving country. Obviously, they didn't like Libya because Muammar Gaddafi was not playing their games. He wanted gold for his oil, and he was working towards the United States of Africa, and that was unacceptable to their hegemon. So NATO decided to bring democracy to Libya. They did the same thing to Syria, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, and to Yemen. And all the places I've named, thousands of people were killed, and generations of physical development of those countries was destroyed by the Americans. If you look at this map, those are the countries where American bombs were raining down on the civilian population for weeks, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. And they get away with it because of this perception that they are untouchable and they are the global rulers. Now, where did that come from? If you look at this last picture of Yemen, you have to agree, this is inhuman. This is terrorism. But let's look at some history. The US started off as a colony of the United Kingdom, part of the British Empire. And then, at a point, the Americans drove the British out. And World War II was the final coronation of the new global empire, the USA. At the same time, the British Empire started falling apart and collapsing. The USA took over by first bombing the shit out of the countries and then basically occupied them. And in this occupation, they enforced their will onto the local people, and they stole resources like hell and fueling chaos all the time. Just look at what is happening in the countries where America has got bases. And this is now a good time to take a look at this map. Look at all those bases around the globe. Why the fuck are they there? How are those countries in a position to threaten America? How? Meanwhile, the neocon cabal, through support by liberals and greenies, got a solid grip on the US governing systems. And they managed to enforce their will onto whichever president was in charge. The military-industrial complex makes billions, but exported their industrial capacity to please the greenies. And that was a tactical error, serious tactical error. The divide between left and right has now become too wide in America to bridge. The USA should break up. The conservative values of the voters is drowned out once their representatives arrive in Washington. Through NATO and the EU, Europe effectively reconstituted the USSR. And if you don't believe me, just look at this map. Look at how NATO expanded into all the old USSR regions. So the USSR broke apart and NATO gathered the pieces. Look at that map, look clearly. So who is expanding? Who is trying to rebuilding what? They like to put the blame on Putin and accuse him of trying to reconstruct the old USSR. And he has said many times he's got no interest in that. But look at that map and you will understand who are the real reconstitutors. It's now actually the EUSSR. And then came the Ukraine war. Now, I've asked many times, why the hell is the West pumping so much effort, money, and weapons in there? What the fuck are they trying to hide? What are they afraid we would see? What? But Russia is not backing down. And at the same time, Putin is promoting good conservative values for Russian people. This LGBT alphabet shit is banned there. There is a lot of state focus on healthy families. And I saw an article yesterday in which Putin gave the figures of how poverty has been reduced in the past year in Russia, things like that. And I have said it many times, it would be ironic if Russia ends up being the final custodian of good Western values. The West can no longer claim to be Christian. The West can no longer claim to be conservative. The West can no longer claim to have moral standards. Just look at all this gender cuck. And I saw the census that came out yesterday, I think, from England, where Christians are no longer the majority in that country. That should make you wait. What Ukraine did effectively was disarm and bankrupt the West. Russia is not backing down. We are now at a tipping point in Europe. Clearly the US is not really friends of Europe, but is stealing their industries. And the destruction of their energy relationship with Russia was a death blow to the European economy and specifically the European industries. Now, the Americans has realized that their industrial capacity was steeply and deeply destroyed by the green agenda. And now they find themselves in a position that the Ukraine is sucking their arms and ammunition in at such a fucking fast rate that it's becoming critical. Stock levels is now critical in the US and all over Europe. And they find out that their industrial capacity is not capable of matching that. The annual production of certain ammunitions in the West will not last a week in the Ukraine. Think about that. The industrial capacity of Russia, China, India and Iran is more than a match for the West, and the weapon systems in the rest is clearly on par and in many instances superior to the Western weapons. I've listened to a discussion last night in which the one analyst said that the Western weapon systems has become so sophisticated that it takes literally years to train the crews to manage those systems. And then those systems land there in the Ukraine, the armored vehicles, and they start charging over the country there. They hit ditches and potholes and things like that. And all of a sudden the dashboards light up and there is error lights here and wheel alignment out and gas bit and what and so forth, and the thing must go back for a service. They are not durable. The Russian equipment is less sophisticated, less technology in it, but they are functional and they work and they are tough. That's the big difference. Most important is the West realized that they do not have the capacity to produce the weapons and ammo to match Russia. And then we don't bring in Iran, China, North Korea. They are huge producers at the same time. In the US now, the immigrant issue, the migrant invasion is getting out of hand. And the Biden administration tried to ignore that while they encouraged it. Now they don't know how to cope with it. The left and the right is represented in the newcon cabal, but the grassroots right are getting restless. Many Americans are beginning to realize that they cannot vote themselves out of this fix. After the election, those representatives from the conservatives get into Washington and they are just automatically sucked into the mainstream narrative and the wishes of the people out on the prairie. The American economy is teetering, but more important, the role of the dollar internationally is fast diminishing. Now that will have a devastating effect on the American economy. And you can understand that they will fight, literally fight, to prevent that collapse. But it's over. The movement in the rest of the world to a new form of international, or let's call it a trade system between the countries. They are trading in their own currencies. BRICS is working on a basket of commodities to form the new commodity-backed currency for the BRICS countries. Those are things that are indicating that the dollar's days is done as the international major currency. And at the same time, I think the days of the American terrorists are over. I have seen articles in which many countries has indicated that they are now buying weapons from India, from Iran, from Russia, and they want the American bases out of their countries. They want them out, because we know that as Americans, wherever they are present, they are forever stirring shit in those communities and fueling fires to keep the levels of chaos as high as possible, because in that chaos they are stealing the natural resources of those countries by the boatload. Now, the question is, how will America survive this being driven back to them? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, because we've got crazy people there in Washington. I can only hope that sanity will prevail and that the people, the good people of America, manage to take back control over their government. The fact of the matter is, things globally are changing, and it is a fact. America is no longer in a position to dictate to Russia, China, India, Iran, North Korea, the whole Middle East and Far East. I think in the next 6 to 12 months we're going to see a major change. The Americans should dismantle those bases of theirs in the other countries, bring their soldiers back home, focus on rebuilding their country, reviving their industrial capacity, get their borders secure, and be very careful. There is a plan that I've seen documents that was circulating in the UN. Main plan is to get 100 million immigrants into America, and once they are there, they will take over. and they want to unite America with Canada and Mexico. Well, that is a good dream to have, but I think in practical terms, they are going to run into serious shit, because the grassroots Americans is not going to allow the UN to occupy America. Now I'm going to show you these slides. Just look at them. The World Beyond War presented this interactive map of the US military bases around the world. Look at those bases there in Europe. There is a lot of bases. And then you turn the globe slightly and look at that. Look what is going on there. Why the fuck are there so many American bases there? And then we get to Africa, and there's a lot of bases there. Look at that. And then you get to the Pacific. Look there. Look at those pins. Each one of them represents an American base. And then you see, look here down in South America. All over the world, they have these bases. You have to ask why? For me, the answer is simple: to maintain control. But their problem is, the rest of the world is 80% of the population of the world. And those bases in these different countries are no longer welcome, because China is promoting industrial growth and is building a hell of a lot of fast rail connections and highway connections throughout the regions where they are and in Africa. And by that they are promoting economic growth, so the population can see the advantages, and they are now getting a taste of what it is like when they become richer. The old colonies are no longer willing to give their natural resources away to some king somewhere, and they understand now that those resources can benefit their whole country and their population, and Russia and China is pushing that very hard. So I think the Americans will have to go and sit in a little dark room and reconsider their position, and then try and convince the world that they can be a good neighbor. And that is where the future lies. Thank you for your time. Please hit me with a like and a subscribe and share the thing, and throw your comments. I sit here and I talk, but that's my opinion. Yes, many of my opinions is substantiated with facts, but I also share a lot of my thoughts. So, if you don't agree with me, say so and share your thoughts. Thank you.